My son is Dylan Edge, and he had mosaic trisomy 13 or Patau syndrome. Dylan brought a smile to every room. From he started walking, even down crawling, he was on oxygen full time at one point. And you'd see him crawling down the garden as best he could on this extra long wire connected to a concentrator. He's just this little thing, he's going along, but yeah, he was determined. He was determined to be who he wanted to be. He would get into everything, but he just had a cheeky way about him. He was amazing. At the 20-week scan, we found out that Dylan had quite a complex heart condition. 3 quite major conditions all in one. When Dylan was born, he decided to surprise everybody, and his heart was actually doing okay. But he had a complicated blood sugar disorder called hyperinsulinism, which caused his blood sugars to drop. They lost him for a prolonged period. They worked absolutely amazing with him, and they managed to get him back up. But yeah, he had hyperinsulinism and the major heart defect, so we ended up spending quite a lot of time in Alder Hey. They asked us if they could take blood samples and skin samples and various other things to send off, and we agreed. And then we got an appointment when Dylan was about 14 months old, so this is almost over a year later. And the day before the appointment, we received a letter saying, "Your child has Patau syndrome." And I kind of looked at the letter and thought we were going to find out what this was when we went there. It didn't really give an awful lot of information. It just gave the facts of that's what it was. So as technology is as it is at the moment, we Googled it. We went in to see them, and there wasn't an awful lot more information given to us from the geneticists at the time. They just said, well, we don't know what he's going to do. We don't know whether he's going to survive this. We know that children with Patau syndrome, and it was the first time I'd actually heard it used. We know that Patau syndrome is generally incompatible with life. I didn't realise there was ever such a thing as being incompatible with life. Well, those were the words used. So you're trying to take all this information in. You've had 24 hours of looking at memorial pages, and then somebody's telling you he's incompatible with life. But my boy sat in his chair trying to rock himself out of this room, and he is definitely not incompatible with life at that time. Then they went through what other information they could find with Dylan's combination of illnesses, so from the blood sugar disorder to the heart, and the only one that they could find was a little girl in China, and they had a report of her living to 18 months old. Well, we weren't far off that. And so at that point, the fear comes in, and it's like, well, once he gets to 18 months old, he's going to be the oldest that they've got on report. We never heard from the geneticists again. One question I have asked repeatedly through every consultation, through every change of course, has been, please don't let his diagnosis of Patau syndrome affect your decision. Please take it on Dylan. Because it did scare me, and I was told, but a child can't survive with Patau syndrome. And they were sat in the room with me and with Dylan, and Dylan was sat up. And it was like, well, they obviously can, because he is. And it was mosaic, but it was very complicated. His combination of conditions was very complicated. But there is a hope. There is always hope for any child. They'll do what they're going to do. We were very fortunate with the consultants we got over in Alder Hey. The heart surgeon, the heart consultant, his endocrinologist and his neurologist were all very much on the same page as me. But I did meet others that weren't, and if we were seeing, there was a few specific doctors that if they came to him, they were very dismissive. Oh, well, he's not going to anyway. And I heard that a number of times. Well, he's not going to get older anyway, is he? And you don't want to hear that about your child. You never want to hear that about your child. We are all aware of the danger, we're all aware of the prognoses, we're all aware of how complicated these children can be, but they're still our children, they're still children. They're still fighting. And whilst they're fighting for their life and for their quality of life, then they should not be judged on what a piece of paper says in a book. Before the diagnosis, we had bits. So we had hyperinsulinism and we had these complicated heart defects, but we didn't have anywhere we fitted, because you'd go to the heart people and they'd never heard of blood sugar disorders, or if they had, it was diabetes, not the other one. Or you'd go to the other side and, well, they didn't have heart issues. So having Patau syndrome gave us somewhere we belonged. Before that, we lived in a bubble. We didn't know, we survived in a bubble. Getting the understanding from other people who were there, feeling like you weren't on your own in that bubble anymore. It stops you feeling so alone, along with all of the other emotions you're going through and the other things that you're doing. My other children also got to know some of the other siblings who were going through the same thing. Again, all virtually because it's so rare, but still they got that support network too. So yeah, it took me from quite a dark place. From pregnancy, Dylan was given a very low prognosis, even before Patau syndrome was even in the mix. They told us that it was highly unlikely that with his heart complications, that he would live past 1. So we knew that he lived on borrowed time all of his life, and every day was a blessing. Dylan was 1 month before his 10th birthday when he passed away, and he lived a very, very full life. Dylan had a go at everything. He went on steam trains, he went on power boats, he climbed to the top of castles, he travelled length and breadth of the country. He still tried everything, and we still adapted everything we wanted to do so that he could be involved in that. In the last year, yes, Dylan went downhill quite quickly. There was complications after a surgery, and so we moved on to palliative care. It's very difficult to manage, and that was quite an alone time. And it was a time when I turned to a few of the Patau's mums who had been where I was. But I knew after the first surgery he had at the Christmas before he passed away that we were coming towards the end. We were making memories, and at that time it was so important for me to have that support from the community, from the support groups that I had online, from the other Patau's mums that I'd made contact with before, from mums that I'd supported through that time, even though I didn't understand it myself. But yeah, it was a tough year. Trust your instinct. Believe in your knowledge in your child. There were many times when I have butted heads with many doctors who were telling me one thing, and yet working with his consultants, I knew different. You pick up so much all the way through these children's lives. You learn to be their consultant. You know every area of your own child. The doctors that you're working with know the areas that they are specialists, and they are amazing. But yeah, trust your instincts with your child. You know what's going, and you know when it's time. I love the fact that even now I can be walking down the street and a stranger will stop me and say, "You're Dylan's mum," because Dylan had a way about him where he made impacts on people wherever he went. People, I think, more than anything, I would like the doctors that have met him, the nurses that have met him, to realise that he was Dylan. He was not a child with Patau syndrome. He was Dylan Edge. He did it his way. And I think that is what I would like them to take away from that. These children are children. They are their own person. They are going to walk their own path, whichever path that may be. and treat them like a person, not like a diagnosis. Trust the child will do what the child will do. Not every child is going to make it to 10. Not every child is going to pass away before they're 10. They're all just going to go where they are. I think it is just trust your gut. And for me, when Dylan passed, I was at peace with what he'd achieved in his life. So in my head, I needed to make sure that I had given him the opportunity to live as best he could. And I know I did, my family did. He got the best chance he could have.